You know, when we think of Susan B. Anthony, we probably picture the face on the dollar coin, right? The serious, stoic leader of the women's suffrage movement. But what if she left behind a secret history, one she wrote herself, not for a publisher, but for all of us, for the future?
So how do you really get to know someone like that? To get past the legend and find the actual person? You can read all the biographies, sure. But what if they left their own story behind, hidden in plain sight?
Well, it turns out that's exactly what Susan B. Anthony did. In 1903, she donated her entire personal library to the Library of Congress. But before she did, she went through her books and filled them with these amazing handwritten notes. And these aren't just random scribbles. They are a map to her mind, her heart, and the very soul of her movement.
To really understand the rebel, you have to go back to the beginning, to her roots. And the first few books in her collection show us exactly where that unbreakable sense of justice came from. It's a story of family, faith, and a kind of righteous fury that was forged way back in her childhood.
Okay, take this family Bible. For Anthony, this wasn't just some religious text. It was an heirloom passed down through this incredible line of strong women. Her grandmother, Susanna, apparently read it cover to cover every single year. Her mother, Lucy, treasured it. So when Anthony donated this book, she wasn't just saving an object. She was honoring the very women who made her who she was.
Now check this out. One of the few books in her parents' house was this one, an abridgment of the Book of Martyrs. Looks like a pretty standard religious book from the time, right? But Anthony's personal reaction to it was, well, it was anything but standard.
I mean, listen to this note she wrote inside. Blood-curdling horror. And then, religion, what crimes are perpetuated in thy name? Wow, you can just feel the fire in those words. Even as a kid, she wasn't just quietly absorbing these stories. She was questioning authority, and she was absolutely horrified by injustice, especially injustice done in the name of faith. This right here is the spark of the rebel. And a lot of that moral fire was shaped by her Quaker upbringing. She makes a specific point in her notes that her father owned the works of a minister named Job Scott, and she calls his teachings the doctrines that were taught to my father's children. So for her, these Quaker ideas about equality and social justice, they weren't just abstract concepts. They were basically the operating system for her entire life.
So we've seen her roots, but a rebellion isn't a solo act. Her library also serves as this incredible map of her alliances. It's like a who's who of the great reform movements of the 19th century.
For Anthony, the fight against slavery and the fight for women's rights were really just two sides of the same coin. Take her friend Sarah Coates. Anthony praises her as a pioneer for both anti-slavery and for suffrage. This is so crucial because it shows these weren't totally separate movements. It was one interconnected struggle for human rights, fought by the same incredibly dedicated people.
And you know, that respect was completely mutual. This inscription is to Anthony from Sarah Coates's children. After their mother died, they sent her this memorial book. It just shows she wasn't just some colleague. She was this deeply honored leader, respected by the entire families of her fellow reformers.
This note here is just a masterclass in movement building. She starts by praising her ally, Charles d'Eberard Mills, but then she immediately pivots to lift up his daughter, Harriet, who was a suffragette herself. It's like she's honoring the past and empowering the next generation of women leaders, all in one sentence.
But her network didn't just stop at the borders of the United States, not even close. Let's zoom out on that map, because her library shows this powerful international alliance of women fighting for change all over the world. Just listen to the language here. Beloved, honored friend, leader of women. This is from Florence Fenwick Miller, who is a major British feminist. So Anthony wasn't just seen as an American figure. To them, she was a global leader of the women's movement.
And here's another one from the Scottish reformer Priscilla Bright McLaren. Again, beloved and honored friend. But I love that last part, preserving through all her loving woman's heart. They didn't just see a political warrior. They saw a person, a friend with deep affection and connection.
And she felt that connection just as deeply. She writes in one book about spending a delightful time with Elizabeth Pease Nicholl over in Scotland. So these weren't just political alliances. They were real, meaningful friendships that fueled their work across oceans.
This brings us to our final section, and honestly, it might be the most important one. Anthony was smart. She knew that history is usually written by the victors. So in her final years, she picked up her pen to make damn sure the story of her movement and its heroes and villains was told correctly.
I love this. In the margins of a biography, she just completely sets the record straight about two famous political brothers. John Bright, the more famous one, she basically dismisses him for opposing suffrage. But his brother Jacob, she lifts him up, calling him the women's champion. She's literally using the book to write her allies into history and call out her opponents for future generations to see.
And she does it again here. With one single sentence, she makes sure that Parker Pillsbury, a key abolitionist, is remembered not just as some writer, but as the Jeremiah, the great prophet of the anti-slavery movement. She's curating his legacy, giving him his proper title for any historian who might come along later.
So as her life was drawing to a close, she was finally being celebrated as a living legend. This program is from her 86th birthday party in Washington, D.C. Can you imagine? A huge moment of triumph, recognizing a lifetime of struggle.
But then, there's this heartbreaking note, added by someone else. Her funeral took place 1 month from this day. It's just this stark reminder of mortality, written right on a program celebrating her life. Just 1 month after this massive celebration, she was gone.
When you put all of this together, you realize that donating her library, that wasn't some quiet act of retirement. It was her final, brilliant act of activism. In a time when women's histories were so often ignored or just completely erased, she was arming the future with the true story of the movement told in her own hand. It was her testimony, her evidence, her final closing argument to the jury of history.
Which kind of leaves us with one last thought. We might not all have historical archives, but we all have collections that tell our stories, right? Our books, our music, our photos. If someone were to look through your things 100 years from now, what secrets, what passions, what history would they find written there between the lines?